Perfect. Yeah, thank you for the
And
reminder, Jeremy. Yeah, so
yeah,
this,
you were talking about how cohorts is not necessarily the kind of the focus of our conversation today.
yeah,
Which makes sense. Like, I think that cohorts can be useful, but I think there's more we need to do with it. It sounds like Amanda has some plans there, which is great. In the video, I talked a little bit about how it's kind of helpful to understand like your user activity on an instance. I think we can obviously go deeper. I'm glad to hear Amanda has some more plans there.
yeah. Her and I and Reb actually had a long discussion about this a few weeks ago, and the plan is to make it more actionable. See which users are listed as inactive, which users didn't use the system in months 1, 2, 3, and so on. So there's definitely improvements coming there. But yeah, I'd like to focus on DevOps score because, like I said, I think it has a lot of potential. Jeremy, I don't know if you have any thoughts as to the future of DevOps score, what's on the roadmap. I feel like where it is now, it's interesting but not actionable, and I think that's the key here for a lot of folks.
Right. So I'll start speaking to my thoughts. So in the video I talked about DevOps score as being a high level to really help customers try to understand the return on investment. And yes, you're absolutely right that there is no like particularly useful ROI number that makes that exceptionally clear. And I think that's what we need to move towards. Like what I feel that customers kind of look to understand is I'm a large enterprise going through some digital transformation, either of like moving, towards and embracing DevOps, or I'm already familiar with DevOps and I am migrating towards GitLab away from one of our competitors. And I want to understand whether or not this is a tool that we're getting value out of. And that is like the core question that I think DevOps score should answer.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is particularly useful and what we need to lean into is the fact that we have usage ping, we pull data from others, and we can benchmark against others. So, my personal belief that, John Mason is ultimately going to be in charge of kind of digging into and understanding the right direction is, number one, make DevOps score just easily understandable. Like right now, I had to break down exactly what the heck where you get all these numbers. We need to remove that and make it just blindingly obvious, kind of what this feature means. Number two, I think we need to have clear and actionable recommendations in terms of what we do next. There's an issue that I'll as soon as I stop talking, I'll dig up, but it proposed adding just a clear call to action, which is like, you're not using CI. You need to use CI. Here's how you get started. Big red button. Here, learn about pipelines and how they work in GitLab. And I think that is the next, brain dead thing that we need to make happen. And then lastly, it's leaning in more into that benchmarking aspect where now that we've accomplished those two things, we can easily like contextualize and say like, hey, the leader is not the leader is currently defined as like the instance that's creating the most issues per user or whatever, and that is what we need to define the leader as someone who is excelling at using GitLab and shows it in terms of their cycle time, and what are they doing that you can learn from, and that's the story that we need to tell with DevOps score. So I agree that it's interesting, but I think those are the three themes that we need to kind of tackle and problems that we need to solve in that order in order to make it a little bit more effective. What do you think about that?
I honestly kind of disagree in that I think the leader is a misnomer, and I think it's misleading. I don't think you can compare different groups as to where they are on their journey. What I would like to see is us set some kind of criteria for each stage. So right now, I'll just share my screen just so we have this recorded. So right now the DevOps score looks like this. We have 10 things here, but they don't match directly to our stages. And I think we need to get to something that looks very much like this. Our 10 stages with each of these features, and how much of these features are they using? And within each of these stages, like again, go back to DevOps score, we have issues, milestones, and boards. All of those fall under the plan stage. I'd like us to see you have this many issues, maybe per group, maybe per project, this many epics, this many milestones. Also show, here's how many projects are using the Jira integration. And based on all those numbers, we have determined that you have not adopted plan because more than 50% of your projects are using Jira. So you haven't adopted the plan stage, but set some barrier as to what constitutes stage adoption. Same with like, I would say 99% of our customers are already using the create stage, merge requests, comments, collaboration, all that. But set some sort of qualification for each of these stages that says at the bottom, you have adopted verify. You have not adopted package because you're not using enough of the container registry or the dependency proxy or whatever it is, right? I think that would be very useful to folks for them to see, oh, and what might be surprising, oh, we do have 50% of our groups who are using verify. We have adopted GitLab CI as opposed to only 10% of our projects using Jenkins. So those would be numbers that I think would be interesting and actionable on the customer side.
I totally agree. You brought this up for the monitoring example where like there's a very small number of projects that we're using monitoring. And I think you're totally right. We need to consider that. I'd like to see, so it's like the, whether or not we have anyone use, it's like there's two problems, right? It's like 0 to 1, which is like, get someone using the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then if someone's using it, put a spotlight on that group and then try to expand the breadth of projects that are using it across the entire instance. Because like what I've in my opinion, you have, especially with very large instances, there may be pockets of like one specific team is like using CI or they're using monitoring and they're like getting a lot of value out of it. So, in that case, the problem may be like, let's put a spotlight on that team and say like, there is someone in your group that is using monitoring, but like you leverage this by having this more and more teams do this. So what is that team doing that is so effective? So I think you're totally right. And so we don't have that aspect down yet, which is, it's, if 10% of projects are using it, that's not adoption.
Exactly. And I actually created a page, and I'll go back to sharing again. So in the CS handbook, in Gainsight, we're actually monitoring customer stage adoption. So in this, actually the red numbers are good and blue is bad. So blue is customers haven't adopted that particular stage. So this data isn't fully complete. We still have TAMs entering this data, but we're seeing obviously most folks are using create, some plan, 50% verify, which obviously we want to get higher, and less as we go down the board. And we're basing this off of this criteria that I created in our customer handbook, or our CS handbook. So for manage, are you using 2 of the following? Oh, we had some discovery questions, cool. Under the plan stage, are you using issue tracking and or epics across 50% of teams? Now this is all honestly numbers that I've pulled out of thin air to create this page. So I'd love
It's a great start.
Yeah, exactly. It's first iteration. So I'd love to see something like this implemented in terms of DevOps score. Like 50% might be a bit high. And maybe we have different qualifications, right? Like if it's 10 to 25%, maybe we put them in the growing stage or on the path kind of thing. So have different stages and show that to the customer as to where they are in the journey for each stage.
Yeah, and then stick that in usage ping so we just get this data and
exactly
we can just visualize that so you don't have to maintain this separately in Gainsight. That would be a really nice kind of first step.
Well, that's a thing too, right? Like if we can get the usage ping data to reflect stage adoption, we can make it an automatic thing in Gainsight. Right now it's all done manually. The TAMs have to talk to their customers and say, so how much GitLab CI are you using? Are you using our package repositories? Like it's all manual, and then we make a determination that, okay, yeah, they've adopted this stage. But it'd be nice to back it up with actual metrics.
I love that. I love it. My understanding is that, I'm not aware of anyone using DevOps score from a customer standpoint. So if we want to just brutally optimize for dog fooding and our internal customers, I think that'd be that would totally work for me. So John Mason, I think that's something to consider, us, diverting towards. We haven't touched DevOps score for, I want to say, years almost. Like those.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, updating that with some logic that's based off of how like our internal customers want to see this data, that could be really interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting, because there are really two different directions to go with it. One is, serve our interests around stage adoption, or two, help customers actually figure out, what steps that they need to take, not just in terms of adopting the tool, but some kind of process improvement. I think those are both important problems. If we say, listen, maybe the same feature doesn't solve those two problems. Maybe those are two completely different capabilities, but we really hone this one to the internal use. We can also then make an appropriate level of investment. We know kind of the level of polish, maybe different, that we would need to put into it and so on, and we can still deliver a lot of value.
And even from a TAM perspective, we can get our customers, show us your DevOps score, and we'll analyze it together, and I will help you on your journey to adopting the next stage, or maybe make some improvements, recommendations, whether that's training, webinars, whatever you want to call it, brown bag lunches. As a TAM organization, we can help them on that journey. We just need the data.
Yeah,
John,
and you've done a lot of the legwork for us. Thank you.
Well, I hope it's helpful, because I'm finding more and more that I think this is super interesting. And like I said, the focus in sales right now is stage adoption. It's good for the customer, because they're certainly getting more value out of GitLab as a platform and application. And from the sales side of things, it makes GitLab sticky. It makes it harder for them to leave GitLab. And while that seems a little bit self-serving, we believe that's in the customer's best interest as well.
Yeah, I almost wish, I know that TAMs will sometimes like ask for screen shares when they want to understand like user activity. I would love to see DevOps score migrate towards, like, if you want a snapshot of how we're using GitLab, this becomes the view that we ask customers to show us, and then we can adjust our strategy from there. John, something else you said in your comment was that you also state the DevOps score shows ROI. I've mentioned that it definitely does not. We want to get it there. How does this show that GitLab is better than Jenkins or GitHub or any other DevOps tool? If we show directly they're using GitLab more than Jira or more GitLab than Jenkins, that would be valuable. I wonder how we do that. I've always struggled with that question, where I've had customer interactions, and they want that too. They want, like I said, they're spending 7 figures on GitLab. They want to make sure that they're getting the most out of the thing, and they want to make sure that, especially compared to other instances, that they're adopting DevOps and the tool like as effectively as they possibly can. That's really hard to benchmark against other tooling that they might be migrating away from. I wonder how we do that.
Well, I think it starts off by doing an apples to apples comparison. Right now, in our usage ping data, we track how many projects have enabled the Jira or Jenkins integrations. If at that point we say how many projects in GitLab have issues, we certainly count the number of issues in total, but if we could count how many projects have issues in them, and that might be a little bit naive, or what do you want to call it? Not super accurate, but I think it's close enough to say, if this project has X number of issues, they're using issues as opposed to Jira. So that counts as a project. And then we can count how many projects are using GitLab issues, how many projects are using Jira integration. And then we can do a direct apples to apples comparison. Same thing with CI. We have a Jenkins integration. I think we have Circle or Travis, whatever the other one, whatever third-party ones we have as well. How many of those are enabled compared to projects with a .GitLab CI YAML file? Maybe that's, again, a little too generalized. But again, a project to project, apples to apples comparison is definitely what's missing in DevOps score right now.
Yeah, we can definitely start there. That's great.
So who's in charge of usage ping in terms of what metrics we're keeping? Does each group add its own metrics into usage ping, or is there a usage ping group that tries to collate data from across all these other?
So there is a product team that is kind of in charge of the framework, and then they, we offload that to other product teams once it's kind of established, and then others contribute to it. So what's your thinking there?
Difficulty in getting folks to put in the metrics we need. If it's one group, then we can communicate with one group and say we need X, Y, and Z, and then they can do it. If we have to go to group A, we need X, group B, we need Y, and group C, we need Z, then that spreads the load out and makes things more difficult to coordinate, in my opinion.
I agree. So you should talk to Sid Reddy, who's on the telemetry group, to be able to make those requests directly, because you don't have an engineering team. Mm-hmm. It's a little different for the managed stage because we have engineers who can prioritize these things and help lift, but that's not the case for the CS group. So that department should just talk directly to the telemetry group. Okay. And so I would talk to Sid Reddy and make direct asks of him.
Fair enough. Do we have a roadmap for the DevOps score at this point in time, or is that something that's kind of nebulous?
My understanding, and John Mason, feel free to correct me, it is a little bit nebulous at the moment. What the category that we've refactored this into was previously like living in its own category, and we've renamed that category DevOps reports. And the analytics group is kind of thinking and prioritizing and working on how can we make reports in general across the entire product generic and flexible so that we can pull data across the entire application. So that, like, specific changes to DevOps score, I think we're still trying to prioritize behind some of that, and reports can maybe intersect with DevOps score at that point. So to answer your question, direct changes to DevOps score haven't been prioritized incredibly aggressively at the moment. Mm-hmm. Instead, we're focusing on a more generic approach that eventually will help with this. But I think that based off of this conversation, there might be some tactical improvements that we can make to DevOps score in the meanwhile. But I don't know. John Mason, what do you think? I hope I represented that okay.
Yeah, no, you summarized very well. I think as a product manager, we're always thinking about customer demand and what kinds of capabilities are going to move the needle for our customers most, and so on. The value to us in what you've described as GitLab is obvious to me. Providing a framework for talking about stage adoption is a really important business objective. And if we can assist with that, that makes sense. We just have to weigh that against capabilities that, when a customer is making a competitive decision, they see a capability and go, oh, that's going to help me to make better decisions, to run my business better, and so on. And we have had some criticism lately from analysts when we've talked about DevOps score, who said, this tells you about the tool, but it's really not telling you anything about process, and your competitors are doing all these kinds of things to help customers understand their own processes better and make process improvements. So that's sort of the juggling act we have to do. But you've articulated the need very clearly, and even done some great legwork that could help us make some targeted improvements there. So I appreciate your kicking off the conversation, and we'll try to get you clarity soon on what pieces we think we can do.
Sure. Yeah. And if I can help by logging any issues, I'd be happy to do so. So the end goal of this is to make DevOps score more valuable for our customers, but also just to encourage them to turn on usage ping, because so many of our enterprise customers just disable it, either whether it's due to policy or they just don't. There's no good reason for them to do it. We ask them and they say, "What's in it for me?" And we kind of go, "There's nothing for you right now." The hope is there will be eventually.
And I that really resonates with me. The usage ping data is something I care about deeply because it drives product decisions.
Yes.
In fact, just here in 13.1, we spent a lot of time working on adding a bunch of new capability to usage ping, which is going to give us much better insight as to how people are using analytics features. I definitely see the value of having a carrot hanging out there to motivate turning that thing on.
Yeah, and John Mason, I didn't know if you were aware, but the only carrot that we have are the analytics features, DevOps Score and Cohorts. And DevOps Score, at the time it made sense because it's like, well, in order to get any of the leader, boxes, that's data that we obtain from usage ping. So in order to benefit from that information, you should be able to, it's a reasonable request to say that you need to submit usage ping data to GitLab. But so there's a problem that we're confounding here, which is like the evolution of these features should not be directly correlated with the value proposition of usage ping. But at the moment, there is a hard dependency because the only benefit to it is getting access to these two analytics features. So,
if we can find ways, I think of bringing some of that usage ping data to scenarios that not just tool administrators and champions care about, but everyday users care about, that's going to be a bigger win for the product. And give you, we're just trying to convince those administrators to turn on usage ping. If we can get their customers, their internal customers to say, hey, you've got to turn this on for me because I really want to see this, that's a much bigger win. And so that's really been the direction we've been thinking about lately.
Yeah, I think at that point you're getting into like global value stream analytics. And I know we have like project level value stream measurements, which are cool because I saw in 13.0 or 13.1, it's going to be like customizable. So I'm not sure how you would move that up to a global level, but I think there's a value there that we can add on in the future. Absolutely.
John Mason, one easy win is just allowing users to visualize and report on the usage data. Like plenty of customers had said, like, I actually think the data we're providing to GitLab is really interesting, and I want to see that internally so I can see how we're using GitLab across all these different feature sets. So just visualizing that payload might also be a really interesting report that we can think about. But
that was the other thing I was thinking. Yeah, absolutely. Like even within the DevOps score page, if we could take the usage ping payload and display it there nicely with an explanation of what each measurement means exactly, then people can maybe draw their own conclusions in some way, maybe create their own reports. But yeah, exposing more of that data to customers, I think can only be beneficial.
Cool. We're almost at time, but I would suggest that we do this. So, John Mason, feel free to maybe follow up with John, and we can do another session where we kind of start creating issues, and we can kind of brainstorm on some tactical improvements that we can kind of consider prioritizing. And John, feel free, if there's anyone else in the CS or department we should be speaking with and loop into, please let us know. Happy to explore this with some other internal customers as well.
Yeah, off the top of my head, Kristen Lawrence, one of our CS OKRs is around usage ping, and she's in charge of that OKR.
Awesome. Cool.
I'm going to stop recording.
We'll definitely set up a follow-up then. Cool.
Awesome.